This timeout is sponsored by Augie's Locker Room. Augie's features the largest collection of Notre Dame football memorabilia and gifts, including rare and hard-to-find items.
Hey, this is Augie, Augie's Locker Room. Website, augieslockerroom.com. Visit us here or the website.
Tim O'Malley with Tim Prister and John Brice from Irish Illustrated, and we just finished watching 5 segments of practice number 14. Number 15, I believe, is going to be a head knocker tomorrow. A little bit of a scrimmage on Saturday that will conclude camp. We had a chance to talk to 6 wide receivers and Chancey Stuckey as well. Today, Tim, you roamed around a little bit. What were some things you saw at practice leading into probably game week, really, next week for the Irish?
Well, the first thing that we were looking for was Cam Hart,
Yeah.
and he looked pretty fine. It wasn't a physical practice by any means, and he didn't run the tempo stuff, but once they went outside, he was with the first unit at cornerback, was bouncing around. I don't think any of us expected that based upon the way he reacted to the blow to presumably the blow to the head that he took the other night. So that was really, really promising to see.
Jabram Payne was involved again, as he was yesterday. Chance Tucker back for the first time. Ryan Barnes out of a red jersey. John, you had the defense and kind of roamed around for 5 segments. What were some of the highlights?
Yeah, those were 2 of the ones that I noted in our practice report. Both Tucker and Barnes sort of free and back fully go. Cam Hart looked good. One thing I want to note about Cam Hart and Clarence Lewis, I've watched them over the past couple of weeks. They've been using the Monarch machine, getting some extra work after practice. And that Monarch machine that Notre Dame got earlier this year is really neat because it's not just spirals and it throws all over the field, but it can simulate knuckleballs, odd kick bounces, and things like that. And we've seen the DBs themselves getting extra work. So I do think that's noteworthy. And then to your point, just about some of the things going on offensively, we do continue to see Jaden Greathouse and Rico Flores rotating in much earlier than later, to the point that 2 days in a row now, Greathouse has gotten first-team reps in tempo.
Yeah, and I think Chris Tyree generally sits out that tempo drill. Audric Estime has sat out that tempo drill in the past. Chancey Stuckey kind of open today, saying, he's comfortable with 7 wide receivers. I felt like you need more than that, but we can think of the 7 right now. You know who the 7 are. That's what he's going to have for the season. And it is imperative that, as he stated in the spring, that we cross-train because they have to do multiple jobs. Jaden Thomas can do that. He said part of his goal is to make sure more guys can do that. You spoke with Tobias Merriweather. I spoke with Deion Colsey, 2 guys that really need to step up as the season progresses.
Yeah, the 7, let's just say the 2 that we thought could be in the rotation but aren't, and that's Jordan Faison and Braylon James, who he's just young. I mean, it's just there's a lot to learn.
And so's Faison.
Well, yeah, he's very young too. He seemed to be unintimidated by his setting, as you tried to point out to Coach Stuckey, you may have to tap into those guys deeper. But, yeah, I spent a lot of time with Tobias Merriweather today, greatest kid in the world. A young man that talks with a lot of confidence. But then when late in the interview with Coach Stuckey, he was asked, where does Merriweather need to grow or to get better? And he said growth, route running, contested catches, and understanding of the offense. So that pretty much is the gamut of it. But he also reminded us that he is just a sophomore. And you get that, but what he also was a high 4-star recruit coming out of high school, and they really need him and Deion Colsey to step forward. So they're going to get opportunities, especially Tobias Merriweather early on. We were talking about before we hit record here, wouldn't it be great if Merriweather could catch a touchdown pass in the first quarter against Navy just to kind of launch him a little bit? We're talking about the freshman as well, somebody like Flores. I'm sure they're going to get them involved from the outset of the Navy game. John, you were talking about just throwing the ball downfield. You have Sam Hartman. You only have him for 13 games. You need to take full advantage of him. And so I think those guys will get opportunities. They just have to make plays when they're in a position to do so.
When I talked to Deion Colsey, he mentioned that the one thing he really needs to get better at, and he started trying that, he started in the spring through camp, is he needs to play as big as he is. He needs to not let the small corners get a hold of his arms and make him into a smaller player. Top of his route, we see him play big because he can go get the ball. But into the route, blocking, and that will get him more into the rotation, heavier into the rotation, because I think he is just on the outside looking in right now.
Yeah, and one thing I want to note on Deion Colsey that I think is important is we've seen him get ticked off this camp if he's lost a rep, if he's dropped a ball, if something has not gone his way. I'm not sure we saw that in years past. I think that's an important development. Coaches want to see him get mad. And 2 other things to Tim's point about working with those guys. Contested catches is one of the overarching themes for this offensive staff for the entire fall camp. That's why we've seen them especially force feed Jaden Thomas and Tobias Merriweather in some of the early segments that we're allowed to watch. The other thing, this was noted by Chancey today, and something we all have talked about, is these Notre Dame wide receivers aren't going to go against very many secondaries that are better than what they're facing every day in practice. So as frustrating as it is right now, I do think Notre Dame's wide receiver core is going to be fine, and I think they're going to be so much better off from what they're enduring right now. And last thing I'll note is 5 different players this summer logged time on his own as wide receivers to catch at least 20,000 balls inside the IAC off that Monarch machine. That's incredible.
We'll have practice reports at IrishIllustrated.com. We will have a podcast next Tuesday. For John Brice, Tim Priester, I'm Tim O'Malley, and we are Irish Illustrated.